Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. 40 years ago to the day, what is considered as the biggest blot on Indian democracy was imposed on the people. The internal emergency which was proclaimed by then Congress government, led by Indira Gandhi, including suspension of fundamental rights, is considered one of the most traumatic period for then fledgling democracy. That the country came out of it with Mrs. Gandhi deciding to go in for elections, reasons for which are still unclear, is also seen as the coming of age of the Indian democracy. That later the Indian Parliament passed amendments to the Constitution, the 44th, to ensure that the future governments will not find it easy to impose another emergency on the country, also says something about the enduring faith of the people in democracy. However, as some senior politicians and experts have observed recently, have we as a nation done enough since then to ensure that institutions have been strengthened to withstand such an assault on the freedom of the people? What are the lessons we have learned from that sordid chapter of Free India? And what are the lessons we still need to learn? We will discuss all this today with S. Nihal Singh, veteran journalist and someone who experienced it all firsthand, Professor Mridula Mukherjee, historian, Center for Historical Studies, JNU, and someone who has done a lot of work on the period, Vivek Katju, former ambassador, who has his own interesting association with that period. Majeed, Memon, lawyer and NCP MP in the Rajya Sabha, will be on the phone line with us from Mumbai. And Rakesh, Sinha, Director, India Policy Foundation. Welcome to all of you. I think I should start with you, Mr. Katju, first. Though in terms of experience and age and somebody who has seen it firsthand, I should have gone to Nihal Singh. But I want you to first tell us about your association with the emergency.
There is no association with emergency. I just happened to be in the court, as I was telling Mr. Nihal Singh earlier, in the court of Justice Sinha in Allahabad, when he delivered the judgment on June 12th.
So you were an eyewitness to that judgment?
I was eyewitness to the order that he delivered in the court, and I well remember the atmosphere of the court, where he sort of agreed with Raj Narayan's petition, which I think was the proximate cause which set the ball rolling, though nowadays there is evidence coming out that this was being contemplated
much
earlier than that. But I really wonder whether if that judgment had gone the other way, whether the emergency would have been imposed.
I think that's a very important question. Mr. Nihal Singh, that question, if that judgment of Jagmohan Lal Sinha had not come, had gone the other way, you think the emergency would still have been imposed?
I would think so, yes.
You would think so? And
Yes.
why do you think so?
Well, because I think there were forces behind Indira Gandhi, apart from herself, like her son Sanjay at that time, and Siddharth Shankar Ray, which we now discovered, thanks to a book that is being launched tomorrow, that 6 months before the emergency was imposed, he was suggesting an emergency be imposed.
And he had even given a note on that.
Yes, he had written note. So I think he would have done it because, at that time, the speculation was that Swaran Singh would be a stopgap prime minister.
Right.
Or Jagjeevan Ram was waiting for his turn for the prize to fall into his lap. That was the kind of speculation that was going on.
And you were writing about that?
I wrote, yes. Yes. But of course, when the emergency came, it was...
you couldn't...
we couldn't write anything. Actually, a special supplement, which we did so much work to produce.
For what?
That same morning.
Okay.
By the time it was ready, they imposed a total press censorship. So we had to send it to the censor, and you should have seen the paper. I have a copy.
You have?
I still have a copy.
Okay.
Where most of the front page is crossed out.
This was for the Statesman?
For the Statesman, yes.
Okay. Mridula Mukherjee, if that judgment had gone in favor of Indira Gandhi, you think still emergency? What does the historical record show, and what's your own sense of it?
I think we've also got to bring in the larger picture. I think the judgment, of course, in a sense,
Proved a trigger?
sealed the...
It was the trigger.
It was a trigger, and it was like a final kind of stamp on. But I think that the situation as it had been developing with the Navnirman movement in Gujarat and then the whole agitation in Bihar, which was becoming a nationwide agitation led by Jayaprakash Narayan, the whole total revolution thing, I think already things were coming to a very, very sharp head. The forces of the government and the forces of the whole opposition movement, I would say, and we've really got to locate the story in that much broader context. And the larger lesson, which you're asking the question that have we learned or should be learning, is that both the rulers as well as those who lead powerful movements against the governments, which they have every right to do, have to show restraint and work within democratic parameters. I think somewhere the JP movement was also crossing the line when it was asking people in the police and army not to obey orders. And apart from that, the pattern of the agitation, the kind of violence that was coming in, the kind of forces that were involved.
This is one of the controversial things. When people that JP and others were asking people, especially the police and the army and not to obey orders, is something controversial because because what JP apparently was saying was not to obey orders which were unconstitutional and illegal.
Fine. I mean, that there is that interpretation.
Yes.
But let's forget that for a moment. Let's just talk about the call for the gherao of her house, which means forcing her to resign. I think in a democratic setup, it's a really important question which we as people who support movements of opposition have to ask ourselves as far as the methods. How much opportunity do we give also to the other side to find justifications for repression of a particular kind? And this applies across the board. It applies to Maoist movements. It applies to movements of the JP type. And I think the lesson, therefore, to be learnt is Indira Gandhi certainly went wrong. She stepped completely outside the democratic framework. But I think to some extent...
You say that the opposing side gave her the
opportunities were provided. In my opinion, the right course for JP was also to call for a fresh election. And the right course for Indira was also to resign and call for a fresh election.
Mr. Nihal,
that would have been the answer,
Nihal,
a democratic answer. Not to gherao her and make her resign.
That there needs to be restraint from the other side also.
She's talking about the ideal position.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the point is that the circumstances were such and the political atmosphere was such that...
Not just political, even economic atmosphere, social atmosphere.
Well, yes, everything was coming to a climax.
Right.
That's right.
So something had to be done. Now, emergency was one extreme method. But of course, elections would have been preferable.
Right.
But there again, I mean, she felt, and she was, I think, encouraged to feel by Sanjay. That was my sources, what my sources were telling me, to go ahead and be firm. And of course, there was
Siddharth Shankar Ray and others.
Egging her on for a long time, as we now discover.
Right. Mr. Katju, look, I'll come to you, Rakesh.
I cannot conceive that the election or that all this process, and I submit to the greater wisdom of Mr. Nihal Singh and Mukherjee, but I cannot conceive that that the emergency was imposed to, in a manner of speaking, save the democratic and constitutional system of India. It was imposed to save her political position.
Of course,
absolutely.
And if that was done,
absolutely,
then that is why I say that political position was absolutely threatened by that judgment. And hence I am saying that I do not know, despite what Siddharth Shankar Ray may have been advising her, if she would not have tried to find another avenue except for other than the emergency. But once that came to that judgment came, then Sanjay was able to go to her and Siddharth Shankar Ray and say, look, you can't go.
You can't function at all.
You
if you don't
can't
do it.
function, and therefore the
Personal
emergency was.
insecurity came.
That's right. The emergency came as a natural consequence.
Okay, Rakesh Sinha. Rakesh Sinha, the question is, what are the lessons that we have learned or still yet to learn from this? One of the senior leaders of this country recently made some statements about how institutions are still not strong enough to resist something like that if it's going to happen again. Would you agree with that? I'm talking of Mr. L.K.Advani.
Before that, I would like to remind you something of the emergency period. There was a complete political polarization in the country, which we are forgetting while we're discussing the emergency. The Congress and Communist Party of India were together, and rest of the political parties were together. What Mridula Mukherjee made my point of view more easier to get expression. That time the communist intellectuals were with Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Late Bipin Chandra was one of the person. He was from JNU. He completely stood for Indira Gandhi and emergency.
Completely
so
wrong.
It is wrong to blame completely Indira Gandhi. It was no. Okay, let me
You finish.
You are watching that. JP was not
Yeah,
wrong.
but you should not tell lies.
No, you can react to it
I'm giving. I was a small boy, and let me complete.
Okay, you complete.
Whatever I am speaking.
No, you complete.
I am just giving two slogans. The pro-JP movement has given the slogan that तुम नहीं रहे जनप्रतिनिधि हमारे कुर्सी गद्दी छोड़ दो. You are no longer our representative. Quit the chair. It was a completely non-violent movement. And on 4th November 1974 in Gandhi Maidan, Patna, where 5 lakhs people were there, the Communist Party cadres and the Sanjay Brigade people attacked JP. It was a murderous attack on Jayaprakash Narayan. RSS leader Nanaji Deshmukh, who was the organizing secretary of Bharatiya Janasangh, he saved the life of Jayaprakash Narayan. Next day there was a demonstration. You know
No, we are not going to. Rakesh, sorry, we are not getting into those details because a lot of them are already in the public domain. People know about it. We are looking at
because
what are...
Girish, Mridula Mukherjee is blaming Jayaprakash Narayan and the JP movement for equally blaming Jayaprakash Narayan and the JP movement. Let me complete this aspect.
Distortion of what I just said.
जैसा हमला होगा हाथ हमारा नहीं उठेगा.
Complete distortion.
This kind of non-violent movement India has never witnessed in the post-independent India. It was completely communist and the Congress and the communist intellectuals were justifying that time, and now also the Mridula Mukherjee's statement is categorically clear. She is justifying the emergency. She almost is saying that JP was equally to be blamed. JP was nowhere appealed to the army and the policemen to revolt. This was a mere propaganda by Indira Gandhi and the state propaganda against Jayaprakash Narayan just to impose the emergency.
Well, okay. Mr. Nihal Singh, would you agree with that? That it was a propaganda and there was no such calls?
No, that's talking nonsense, frankly. Why don't you place Mr. Advani's statement in the political context, which was meant to be such, whatever explanations Mr. Advani gave later for obvious reasons. And this was a swipe at the leadership of Mr. Narendra Modi. And that was it.
Anyway, we will come back to that point, but as far as the statements made by
we are not discussing L.K.Advani's statement. You are discussing emergency.
No, we will come back
and
to
everything you are imposing the Narendra Modi.
We will come to L.K.
Advani has not mentioned Narendra Modi. You are interpreting everything Narendra Modi.
I am not interpreting.
This is just a propaganda.
I have asked you a question.
Rakesh,
let us not get into here.
You are.
I'll come to you. You will discuss. I asked you a question.
Any question you can put against Narendra Modi.
No, I asked you a question.
I don't expect that you have to make a propaganda against the Prime Minister of the country.
There is no propaganda here. You are trying to make it.
Prime Minister of the country.
There is no propaganda here. Rakesh, will you please listen to me?
Narendra Modi, and you are making a question.
Rakesh, will you please listen to me? Otherwise, this kind of debate will not lead to nowhere.
Anyway, wrong discussion.
I will come back to you. Mr. Majeed Memon, one of the questions raised in the recent past by people about whether the institutions are strong enough to resist some kind of a emergency being imposed in future at any point of time. You think that the legal instruments are strong enough to resist this kind of thing?
See, all this discussion became necessary only because Mr. L.K.Advani happens to have made his opinion known to the people that in the present set of circumstances, he is apprehensive that there could be imposition of emergency. What does that mean?
He later said he was not talking of present circumstances.
Then why does he talk today? Why has he spoken? The one who wants to oppose it, please answer this question. What was the occasion for Advani to speak this? What
40th
happened?
anniversary of emergency.
No, what has happened? What event occurred which made Advani say this?
He was the victim of the emergency.
No. Why does he remember it after 40 years?
Emergency. Had Advani not spoken on the emergency,
Rakesh,
there would
let
have
him
not have
finish.
been discussion on the emergency.
Rakesh, let him
My
finish.
dear friend, why
Mr.
does
Memon,
he say today?
Mr. Memon,
and
please
have you-
continue.
Yes, please let me uninterruptedly, I would explain.
Yes.
Yashwant Sinha's today's statement, his displeasure in the present form of government, that is, and the manner in which the government is functioning, you can read between the lines.
Okay, we will read.
That there is
No, but
dissent in BJP,
Mr. Memon,
but we are not concerned.
No,
we are
Mr.
not
Memon, let us
concerned with
get
that.
back to the issue.
Yes, let us come to issue.
The
Now,
issue
see,
is
as far
whether
as-
the issue is whether we have our constitution is strong enough to, that such kind of imposition of another emergency will not be possible.
Yes, the answer is yes, because you see, Constitution very categorically suggests that it is only in extreme situations, and those extreme situations could be external threat or mutiny or something of that kind which is beyond the control of any political dispensation, that emergency can be justifiably imposed, not otherwise. Not because if a strong leader feels that his position is becoming a bit shaky or unstable,
Right.
or some political development can be foreseen that he may fall, his government may fall, therefore impose emergency. That would not serve. Now, if you go back to 75, during the emergency days imposed by Ms. Indira Gandhi,
Right.
that was preempted by her unseating by a process of judicial process,
Right.
a court of law. It was, and then naturally, after the position of emergency, we are all witness to it. The country and the history, constitutional and legal history of India would suggest that immediately after imposition of emergency, all the opposition leaders were put inside prison.
Right.
Prisons were overflowing. Now, that is not a normal situation.
Right.
That's an extra.
Okay.
Which is not supposed to reoccur in our
Okay.
country again today.
Okay. Rakesh, if you want to finish the point which you are trying to make,
Yes.
this is not there is no propaganda happening here. It is we are trying to analyze the situations. As far as Mr. Advani's statement is concerned, it is something which needs to be discussed, and you don't need to get so worked up about it. So if you have anything to say, please respond to this. Respond to what Mr. Memon said or Mr. Nihal Singh said, and we'll proceed.
And there's just 2 points. RSS was at the forefront of the underground movement. Had there not been RSS, emergency would have been prolonged not only 19 months, 19 years. It was the RSS who has led the end of the emergency. And during the emergency, there was the first time organized onslaught on the minorities. Turkman Gate, Muzaffarnagar, and Pipli are 3 examples. RSS had never associated with such kind of anti-minority issue of Mrs. Gandhi and the Communist Party. That's why I am telling you that the present dispensation of the BJP and RSS, they have learned lesson from the emergency.
They have learned lessons.
Such terror, how to combat such state terrorism. So there can't be question that anybody can think.
Fine.
Any lunatic person can think that any RSS man will think in terms of imposing emergency.
Okay, we'll take a word. Yes, Mr. Katju.
I think Mr. Menon has very well put the constitutional position up front. The real difficulty with the emergency was that it was a fraud. Whatever may be the contending political forces
I don't think
at that time.
there's any two opinions on
the
that.
reason why I'm saying it is that there's been such popular discontent with the emergency was not only the steps that were taken, but the feeling that it was wrongly imposed.
Absolutely.
If there's an actual emergency situation, then it would be a different context altogether. Now, your subject is lessons learned.
Exactly.
I personally feel that across the political class, and at the end of the day, the imposition of an emergency and the sustainability of an emergency conceptually will be on two classes. It rests on two classes, the political class and the coercive apparatus of the state. They have to act in unison. Now, fortunately for us, the coercive apparatus of state is apolitical. And that is something that we need to maintain and will be maintained. I think that's the nature of our system. The political class, I feel, has learnt its lesson across the board, that an emergency is simply not sustainable in the Indian context. Mrs. Gandhi, I suspect, learned that lesson during the emergency, hence
She ordered for the election.
the election. And thereafter, the political class has realized that the complexities of India are such that there is no question of going in for an emergency.
Especially, Mridula Mukherjee, especially in the present context. 40 years down the line, we are, world is a completely different place. The communication systems and, there's a whole lot of changes which have taken place. Even if somebody tries to think of it, it would be impossible, as Mr. Katju says, it will be very difficult to sustain it. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think I would qualify that, say it would be very difficult. As a historian, I find the use of the word impossible a little difficult because such surprising things happen in the course of history.
Yes.
Who would imagine that the cradle of Western civilization, Germany, birthplace of philosophy, of Hegel, of Marx, the best musicians, that fascism and in its worst form, Nazism, could take root there, right? So I think as a historian, I would say the only answer is to be ever vigilant.
Ever vigilant.
Not be sanguine and say, this cannot happen to us. We are too great. We are complete. Our secularism is there in our birth, so we can never become communal. We are totally democratic because our traditions of debate and dissent go back to the Vedas. All that can give us strength, but it is still not inoculation or a vaccine. The only vaccine is daily vigilance.
Mr. Nihal Singh, institutions which Mr. Advani spoke about, whether the institutions are strong enough, have we ensured that these institutions are strong enough to sustain and not allow itself to be overruled?
My fear
overridden?
Is that, especially in the ideological field, the kind of steps that are being taken by the present government today will lead us into a cul-de-sac, because frankly, what is happening to all the historical institutions, the research institutions, with pro-RSS people, sympathizers being promoted as heads of these organizations, plus more recently what's happening in Pune at the Film Institute, with a BJP person being imposed as director, as the chief. Now, if you are going to take this very seriously, as the RSS intends to do, where does the country go? And then if you're talking of institutions, if you think that the concept, or whatever you call it, Hindutva or whatever, is more important than more than 60 years of, shall we say, Gandhi-Nehru ideology, if I can call it so, then where does the country go? And if you are emphasizing the majoritarianism, as seems to be the case, where do 150 plus million Muslims go?
Okay. What you're saying is majoritarianism is something which we need to guard against.
Well, they are demolishing the integrity of institutions.
The Prime Minister has said that the government is totally committed to constitutionalism. But constitutionalism in India permits the contention of various ideological views. And as far as institutions are concerned, governments of a certain ideological persuasion will put in heads of their persuasion, just as the previous governments have done.
Why?
Now, previous governments have not put in people of the RSS persuasion. Have they? Name me one person. Now, the people of India have voted for a particular government. Let us accept and honor that verdict.
That is okay. That of course everybody is going to accept. Mridula Mukherjee, you know, what he is saying. He has a point. That, you know, do we have to make a big hue and cry about a particular government with a particular ideological persuasion doing what it thinks is right in its own wisdom?
May I come in here?
Yes,
Just to
please.
say one sentence. Because you are producing a history which is myths.
Okay. Apart from that.
You know, I would say that, look, you know, if you're talking about institutions, I teach in a university, I can talk about universities. We're all the time wanting to be in the first 100, in the first 500. Now, look at the institutions which are in the first 100 or 50. We are great admirers of the United States. Why don't we learn from how governments stay off universities? You want great universities, but you want to tell them whether they should have a 4-year course or whether they should have a 1-year course or a choice-based credit system. I mean, we have to mature and learn that just because you're putting your money doesn't mean you control universities. In Holland, they have a rule that if the government is funding a program, then government cannot have any control over that program. You know, this is how you learn to grow. Now, dissent.
We are very far from that kind of
you're talking about institutions. Again, I would say, from my experience in the academic world, I would say that the amount of resistance and dissent that one would expect and that one would think would be a guarantee, I don't see that degree of capacity for dissent.
Rakesh, you think that
conformity.
Rakesh, you think that the lessons have been learned and there are no more lessons to be learned from the emergency?
I was listening Mridula Mukherjee ji. My modest question to her.
We don't have time for another.
Listen to others also.
Yeah, please.
No,
why am I getting exclusive
Rakesh,
attention?
No,
from
I'm
you?
just calling that.
Yeah, please answer my question.
No, because I had leaning with the RSS. Marxist teacher asked me what is difference between you and Nathuram Godse. You have excluded RSS from all academic positions. And
No, let us not get into that. Let us not get into that. Rakesh, we will have a separate debate on this, but we don't have time for that now.
Such kind of things are being.
No, you are not answering my question.
Being expressed here.
Rakesh, please understand.
My question was that people are saying that RSS people are dominating majoritarianism. There is no threat to democracy as
there is
long
no
as
threat to
RSS
democracy.
Is
Okay, fine.
Okay,
fine.
It is the RSS which fought against the emergency.
Okay.
And as long as RSS is here, I just watch that there is no threat of democracy. There is no threat of
Mr.
emergency.
Katju, no, one of the institutions, very quickly, which you think has learnt its lessons, has the judiciary learned its lessons? Since you have been associated with judiciary.
No, I'm not associated.
Your
the
family
has a background.
Your background of judiciary in your family. You think that because that's one of the institutions which can insulate, against such actions.
Look, the judiciary is the weakest arm of the 3 arms of state. Let's not forget that.
Okay.
Now, it has happened that the Indian judiciary has become an activist judiciary because of a certain vacuum in the situation, in the executive branch especially, and I believe rightly the executive branch is now sort of regaining lost
Trying to
space.
regain. Okay.
That I believe is right.
Okay. Last, what are the lessons still to be learned?
I think the lessons still to be learned are precisely the strengthening of institutions. I'm worried about the media.
Okay.
I don't see the media
also.
as independent as I would like to see it.
Mr. Nihal Singh, very quickly.
Well, I would agree with that because emergency proved that most of us failed.
The media failed.
Media failed.
And the media needs to learn a lesson.
Needs to be honest with itself.
Absolutely. I think on that note, we need to, and this is a debate, I'm sure, which is endless, and I'm sure that many more debates can be held on this. Very contentious issue. Emergency was controversial and contentious. 40 years later, it still evokes the same kind of controversial and contentious debates. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.